most people, what they associate most with the Audi RS badge, I think it might just be the turbocharged straight 5 engine, such as the one you find in this, the latest Audi TT RS. But of course, what people are really thinking about is this. But even when you're in, well, a car as rare and special as this, the original, you're probably actually dreaming of being in one of these. This is the Audi Sport Quattro S1.
And it's everything you think it's gonna be. Now the back straight here, so 5 gears going stick. Whoa! It is an absolute animal of a car. Wow! I'm sliding in this S1E2!
And this is not just any old Sport Quattro S1 or E2 as it's sometimes known. This is perhaps the most important, most storied car that still exists from the original 20 that were built. We'll come back to this specific car's history in a bit, but first it's worth having a quick recap. The original long wheelbase Quattro took the rally world by storm in 1980, but by 1984 the other manufacturers were catching up. So the short wheelbase Sport Quattro, or Shorty, was launched. But it wasn't enough. Where Piech felt the pressure to maintain a link with the road cars, the likes of Peugeot and Lancia were building mid-engine silhouettes. The Sport Quattro was simply outclassed by the 205 T16 in particular. So, in a relatively short space of time, the monstrous S1 or Evolution 2 was developed. The most visible difference was the huge amount of aero, the first time a rally car had used wings and splitters for downforce rather than simply balance. To help with weight distribution, the battery, alternator, oil cooler and radiator with 2 fans were all moved into the boot, with pipes running back through the cabin. Because the 5-cylinder was still ahead of the front axle, the 55-45 front to rear weight distribution still wasn't perfect, but it was better. The addition of a centre differential helped too, and there was more power to distribute, up to 580 brake horsepower with the variable boost turned all the way up, although we're probably running just under 500 today. The end result was quite simply the most iconic Group B car ever. The slightly inconvenient truth, however, is that it only won a single rally, the 1985 San Remo with Walter Rohrl at the wheel. Incredibly, that car, chassis number 11, was scrapped, meaning that this, chassis number 2, registration INNY18, is arguably the most historic S1 in existence. It has been owned by Audi UK for 25 years, and today I'm probably getting more time in it than anyone has since the late 90s. It started its life by finishing second in the 1985 Thousand Lakes Rally in Finland, and then it won at the non-championship Masters International Rally in Sweden, both with Stig Blomqvist at the wheel and Bjorn Cederberg in the silly seat. We'll get on to what it did after that in a bit, but first, here is the wonderfully unassuming, softly spoken Stig to tell us a little of what he remembers about driving it.
Okay, this is my car from Thousand Lakes, 85, and that was close to win, but we had a small difficulty with the gearbox, but we managed to get second anyway, and this car then was a really nice car in Finland, that's for sure. This car, when we get all the wings and things on it, it was really nice over the jumps and could fly, and it always landing a little bit with the rear first, and that was perfect. It was behaving more like a front-wheel driven car and a rear-wheel driven car, so I think I had a big favor compared with the other guys when they was coming, because I was the only one who came from a front-wheel driven car. What just had left foot braking and all these things into the corner was doing the same job there, so that was helping me a lot. And okay, with this one now, of course, we had the power there as well. We had about 150, 200 horsepower more than what we had in the A2, so that make a big difference. Because if you try to be a bit careful and slowly, then the car was not nice at all, really. You have to be quite tough to it in the early days when we didn't have the differential what we had in the end and things like that. So you have to drive the car. You couldn't let the car driving you.
Excellent advice, but easier said than done when you're not a World Rally champion.
Off boost! It's okay, but as soon as that boost comes in, whoa, just wants to fight you. Now the back straight, everything kind of happens at once when that boost comes in, because you might be adding lock, or you probably want to change up a gear. You do feel like you want to try and work really hard to get the nose of the car in. You think of Quattro on San Remo when you're one of these, or Stig on 1,000 lakes. I mean, what a thing. It's interesting because it doesn't really like turning into corners, but it also feels really light. It only weighs 1,100 kilos. Gear shift is nice once you get used to it. Pedals, not very easy to heel and toe, but a bit of left foot braking can just help keep the nose in. Rohrl used to say that you had to think 2 corners ahead in this car, and I can certainly see what it meant.
As you can see, you sit fairly upright in a Kevlar seat surrounded by the dubious protection of an aluminium roll cage. A bank of dials informs the driver, while a couple of the most important are replicated on the co-driver's side. There is a knob on the dash for the variable boost, with another on the transmission tunnel for the brake bias. The doors are very light, the clutch is very heavy, and the tyres, well, they're very old and now very unobtainable. But even though the Michelins are not producing the grip they might have in their prime, it's still a serious workout from behind the wheel.
It's a really physical car actually, for all that, yes, it does feel lighter than I expected. The steering, you're really working at it, the acceleration, the G-forces. They said the dabs on this aren't really quite perfect. Just a little bit of left foot through there. It is hot work in here. You're really kind of wrestling with the bear, and you have the feeling that the bear is always going to win. And it's not a car that you can really be that precise with, because, I mean, when the boost comes in, it's like a bomb going off. It really is extraordinary. So you're constantly working to try and get the nose into corners. This long corner down here, I'm taking a wide line just to and then feed that boost in. Front tyres are nearly as old as the car, so that's another thing to deal with. And if you get a quarter right and you're on boost, then it feels completely different to if you slightly fluff it and don't have all the boost coming in. Get it wrong and you think, what am I doing here? The car's laughing at you. Get it right, the car seems to get a mind of its own almost. Being precise, trying to fight with it. Being precise isn't really a thing, because it all depends where you've got it right to get the boost coming in. Down this back straight, you just rise it up. It's weaving with all the campers. I mean, again, what it must be like on a bumpy, narrow tarmac road. Well, the car just wants to fight the front and rear diffs, obviously wants to do something. When you drive it slowly, you can feel this slightly weaving, tugging front end, like extreme heavy sort of torque steer. Wow. Oh my word.
Now, while I take a moment to catch my breath, I want to talk about gearboxes. This car has a manual H pattern fitted, but there is a little white button on top. This activated something known as the bomb under the bonnet, which used hydraulics to slam the clutch pedal to the floor. It apparently worked brilliantly, but it was also responsible for breaking the left feet of several mechanics, so understandably they tend to keep it disabled these days. However, later on there was also an even more advanced system fitted to this car. It was this, a PDK gearbox, Porsche's automated double clutch system. In November 1985, Walter Rohrl drove this very car with the PDK system fitted in the Semperit Rally in Austria, and he won by over 18 minutes. He then used the box again in the 1985 Lombard RAC, but although it undoubtedly made the car quicker, dropping the 0-60 time from 3.1 to 2.5 seconds on gravel, it was also almost impossible to know which gear you were in, a trait that Rohrl blamed when he and Phil Short rolled on stage 15 in South Wales.
I mean, it's nice having a manual box because in some ways obviously it gives you a momentary pause when this had a PDK box and it just kept spitting gears at you and the pace never stopped. Right, let's do third gear on the back gear so you can see 4, 5, you see it starts to build and then 6 just takes off. Wow. I mean, I've driven quite a few WRC cars and I mean this is, everybody talks about Group E being fearsome, it really is. I've never had to work so hard in a rally car in all my life. You think of Group E, you think of this car. And it's not just because of the looks. You know, it's not perfect, it's a long way from it in terms of its handling, but boy is it exciting. And that noise. The noise of the 5-cylinder, but then the noise from the turbo. That wastegate chirping. What an experience. Hats off, Stig. Chapeau.
Group B cars were of course banned from the WRC at the end of 1986 after a couple of horrendous accidents. And it's equally well documented that the far less powerful Group A cars were going even faster just a few years later. But the spectacle that Group B cars provided, the awe that they instilled in those watching, the bravery asked of their crews, those are things that have arguably never been matched. And the Audi Sport Quattro S1 is arguably the most emblematic car of the entire era. It's why, to this day, the sound of a turbocharged 5-cylinder is so evocative.